This was a very interesting session. It's encouraging seeing efforts in integrating real-world evidence to potentially speed up research advances, approval of new medicines. So we were discussing basically what's the role in real-world evidence for regulatory purposes, but trying to see also all the concerns, what weaknesses we see nowadays in the real-world evidence that we have available. And it's clear that when it comes to real-world data, most of this data has been collected retrospectively and not for research purposes and not for regulatory purposes. Not only that, it lacks completely data on quality of life as referred by the patients. It doesn't have patient-reported outcomes well integrated, well collected. There is lack of harmonization. But on top of that, the lack of robustness, the absence of a clear established framework, how the data needs to be collected, what needs to be collected, and the timelines for collecting that data, because the timing for the assessments can modify completely the perception if you are expecting to use that data for potentially as comparator for a clinical trial that otherwise would be a single-arm trial. So what's the role? From the ethical point of view, when you have these rare diseases that have run out of options, and you are potentially offering a treatment that could provide hope and could provide a chance to control the disease or to improve patients' quality of life. It's true that it doesn't seem ethical, and it can cause certain reluctancy for the patients to enroll the trial if they are not pretty sure that they will receive the treatment, because they already know that with the other treatment that could be the standard of care, for instance, sometimes the comparator is really, and don't take me wrong, this is the best way for me to describe it, is the worst comparator, considering all the treatments that are available in the market. And we see this constantly in the lymphoma space. Many of the trials continue being using the comparator arm with R-CHOP. We have so many new things already available that we could be using those. However, it's referred to the other one. So that causes issues for recruitment. And now that I mentioned that, I want to stress that one of the points that was raised during the discussion is the question on if timing for collection of data in research, for instance, in clinical trials or in real-world evidence, it's a value itself. And if we should be measuring that or capturing that, how long it took to collect certain data. That is very interesting. So when we are thinking about offering a patient joining a clinical trial that may not be offering, especially for randomized clinical trials, of course you see the opportunity on integrating real-world evidence. However, how to ensure that the robustness, the reliability of that data that you integrate is really reflecting the high quality data that you need for those purposes. Secondly, that is really truly representative of real world. And my aspiration is that all these discussions that are taking place will make us realize how important it is to reflect the patients in real world when we design the clinical trials, and not the opposite. Because one of the discussions is, if I narrow too much the criteria, the inclusion criteria, for the patients to be in a clinical trial, should I compare with the total population, or should I do the same exercise, to narrow down, to match the criteria, and then I can compare? Otherwise, here you already have highly selected patients, so the opportunities for them to do better, no matter what the treatment is, are there, or at least we have the question. Is that a factor that influences the outcomes? But I don't want the real-world data to be narrowed down to match the criteria. The dream is to have the opposite, to have trials that are really, truly looking for defining a patient inclusion criteria that represents the patients in real world. Otherwise, we will have issues. Other point of discussions, well, it was quite an intense session, so I really recommend everybody to go to the platform and watch the session on demand. But one of the other factors was how to integrate quality of life data that currently is missing. So that should be also part of that exercise and that the definition of that robust framework. And that's where I opened also the discussion on what's the role of patient experience data, because when we have these discussions, we don't listen easily about patient experience data. And there are quite good patient experience data, especially produced by the patient organizations. That's the case at least of Lymphoma Coalition. We have our global patient survey that it's a biennial survey. This year in 2024, we collected close to 12,000 responses. And we have also representation of the caregivers there. So now the research team, together with Lorna Warwick, are in the process of analyzing that data. But there are good things there that are currently being used to inform the validation of patient-reported outcomes tool, validation in registries, what data they should be capturing. So that was my role as patient representative, to ensure that when it comes to discuss regulatory processes integrating real-world evidence, we don't take only the clinical data, but we truly represent the meaningful outcomes for the patients, and that we also see beyond, because it's not about the regulatory processes. We are not capable to be prepared to answer the questions of the HTA bodies for instance, the joint clinical assessment right now, or the scientific assessments. We will be in troubles at the end. And this is not about approving medicines better, but it's about really making them available for the patients who need them the most.